Hey there. When you think of the word webinar, what comes to mind for you? Are you thinking words like boring, tedious, and dull? That's really too bad because presenters have tons and tons of valuable content they want to share. But the learning can't get into attendees' minds if they're tuning you out. So in this video, we're going to make your next webinar super engaging by revealing the 5 mistakes that presenters make and what to do instead. I will reveal the 5 mistakes nearly everyone makes when giving webinars. Now, most webinars are doomed to failure within the first 2 minutes. What? The first 2 minutes? Yes, the first 2 minutes. So I'll share what participants think as these very common mistakes play out, but more importantly, how to flip that script so that each time you can make your webinars wildly engaging. Let's dive on in. Mistake number 1. Waiting for the official start to start your webinar. You might have noticed that you have early birds. Early birds are people who log in 15 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 3 minutes before the webinar. Usually they're 3 minutes before the webinar. They're logging in, they're getting the lay of the land, they're making sure they understand the platform, whether cameras have to be on or off. They're thinking through all of those things, and they're very conscientious folks. They like to log in early. Now, if they log in early and they're in the waiting room and nothing is happening in the waiting room, they'll think, yay, I can go do something else. And they dive into email or text or social media, and they're busy multitasking while they're waiting for the webinar to start. And that's not necessarily the very best thing, because if they're getting sucked into email and text and social media, it means they're not watching when your webinar starts. And they're so focused on what they're doing that as your webinar starts, they're not paying attention. And then a few minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes later, when they decide to sort of pay attention to your webinar, they're in trouble because they can't pick up that thread any longer. We don't want that to happen. So from now on, don't wait for the official start to start your webinar. Start your webinar early. Okay, so what do? What I like to do is I like to start my webinars approximately about 3 minutes early. And in this time, I do one of two things. If it is a small group, a small audience, I'll just talk to them. I'll say, hi, how are you doing? And just let a organic conversation flow. Now, what is a small audience? A small audience is any less than, 14 people or less. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for 14 people or less for a small audience, and you can have this very organic conversation. You welcome people by name. You say hi. You could ask them where they're coming in from. You could ask them kind of a starting question around the topic. But what do you do when the second thing happens? What if you have so many people in your waiting room that it is more than 14? What if it's 15? What if it's 30? What if it's 300? Well, then you want to have a little activity or a question on hand, and you're asking them to reply in the chat. Now, you can ask them who they are and where they're from, what organization they work for, or what title they have, and all of this is very expected. But you can also ask other questions. And what I think about here is, what is the tone that I want to create for my webinar? Do I want them to be playful, fun, creative? Is it a serious topic that takes a lot of concerted thought? Do I want them to be collaborative with other people in the chat? And that's how I think. I will ask those questions. What kind of goal, what kind of tone am I trying to create? How do I want people to feel during my webinars? And I'll create questions or very, very small, easy activities based on that. Okay, so that is the unofficial start. Mistake number 2 is starting your webinar late. So perhaps the last time you attended a webinar, you heard something like this. You log in and the host says, okay, so we're waiting for everybody to file in now, and there's lots of people who registered and we're waiting for them. So we're going to wait another kind of 2 minutes as people log in. So I'll be quiet for another 2 minutes as people log in. You might have heard something like that, right? They push the starting off a little bit. Or you might have logged into a webinar and you saw this. Nobody, the host, the presenter, nobody's looking at the camera. They're looking at their screens, they're looking at other things, and nobody's talking. And I don't know about you, but I feel like, oh, maybe I'm in the wrong place. What's going on here? So you don't want either of those things. You never want to start late. You want to start on time. Now, not everybody has come in late, so you don't necessarily want to start introductions right away. You don't want to get into the meat of your content right away. So what do? I start with another interactive activity or question, and usually now I'm asking questions that are very related to my topic. And here what I want to do is I want to invite people to use the chat. And I want to get them used to using the chat because we want this to be a very participatory webinar. Participation equals engagement. So I talk about engagement all the time. So one of the questions that I might ask is, what does being engaged feel like? So think about the last time that you were really, really engaged in a community. What does being engaged feel like? Please type your answers into the chat. Notice that my question was super short. It was easy. It's something that there's no wrong answers. And my question is something that anybody can respond to off the top of their head. We've all had these kinds of experiences. Now, another thing that you want to look for is you want to look for questions where when people answer them, it really invites connection. That when they're reading the answers in the chat, they say, oh, there's other people who feel like me, right? And as you're narrating the chat, you can pull those out. You can say, oh, I see a lot of people are saying energized when they feel engaged. A lot of people say that they're feeling belonging, they're feeling connected, they're feeling heard, they're feeling valued. And you can pick all of those up when you're narrating the chat. Mistake number 3, long presenter introductions. Okay, remember, people are looking for the status quo. They're looking for the usual. They're looking for any excuse to tune you out and jump into their email, their text, and their social media. So we don't want to give them that excuse to multitask. And one place where they're going to tune you out is long presenter introductions. So I've heard a couple of things. I have heard people come online and they have somebody else, or they themselves will read their own bio that is already on the landing page for their webinar. You don't want to do that. The other thing that people will do is they'll get on and they will pontificate. They will just reel off all of the things that they've done and the jobs that they've had and the credentials that they've had and the books that they've written in an attempt to gain credibility. We don't want to do any of those things. So here's what I do. When I start a webinar, and somebody is introducing me, I write for them a quick, fun script that is about 3 to 4 very, very short sentences. When I am introducing myself, I use one singular sentence. I say, hi, my name is Lea Kaiser. I am the author of Elevating Engagement. That's all I say. That's all you need. And this is a good time now to think about what you want to be known for. What is that one point of credibility that you want to use in your next webinar? Hopefully it's something that links to your webinar topic. And so if you want, you can pause right now, think and write down what is one thing that you want to be known for, the one thing that will help spur your credibility in your next webinar. All right. Mistake number 4. Long topic introduction. You've introduced yourself, but now you're introducing the topic. And one of the things that I have heard is speakers will launch into a long, meandering explanation of what you'll be learning. And essentially what they're talking about is they're telling you their hero's journey. You can tell your story. You can tell your hero's journey, but not now. What you want to do is you want to draw them in and let them know what they are getting and try to make it in a sentence or 2. Now, the example that I'm going to use is the exact words that I used when I started this video. This is a really great example for how to do a topic introduction. You're setting that hook. You're letting them know what they're going to get. So here are the words that I said to give you a sense of what that very short topic introduction is. Okay, so I said, I will review the 5 mistakes that nearly everyone makes when giving webinars. Most webinars are doomed to failure within the first 2 minutes, so I'll share what participants think as these very common mistakes play out and how to flip that script each time to make your webinars wildly engaging. So that's all you need. You need just a couple of lines to let them know what they're going to get out of listening to you for the next hour. You are now at the 1 or 2 minute mark. We have gone through 4 mistakes and you're only at the 1 or 2 minute mark after the official start of your webinar. You've already opened your webinar early for your early birds and you've engaged them. You've started on time, ideally with a question that's super simple or a very short activity. You've also introduced yourself and you've even introduced your topic. And now you've set the stage for a super engaging webinar, except you've got to keep them engaged. Mistake number 5, lecturing. Most webinars are boring because they are passive. People sit there and they watch and they listen. And the moment they start to feel restless, they got to do something else, they dive into, you guessed it, email, text, and social media. Being passive is not engaging. Being active is very engaging. So think about how to bring your fabulous content to life for your participants by asking them to be active. Ask lots of questions and get them to respond to you in the chat. You can also ask questions in platforms like Mentimeter. You can have them vote in Mentimeter. You can throw up a PowerPoint slide and in Zoom use the annotate function and have them stamp or vote for different ideas. Don't worry, I'm going to put all of this information in the show notes. You can use a platform like Pickles and you can ask questions like, how does engagement feel? And people can draw their answers and then you show them all of the drawings that everybody else has done. So there's lots and lots of ways to get people active. Now, I talked a little bit about the chat. The chat is your best friend and it's also their best friend. The chat is their opportunity to be super active, to talk with others, see what other people are saying. And so I propose that you sprinkle in lots of questions that they can use or answer in the chat. And you can reward their answers by narrating the chat. So you ask a question, you wait for a couple of beats or two as everybody's putting in their answers. Maybe you're riffing on something else for a little while. And then you look at that chat and then narrate. Hey, I see Rebecca said this, and Steve, and Colleen, and you just go through and you narrate the chat a little bit. Now, one of the questions that people ask me very often is, what happens when my webinar is pre-recorded? How do I get that kind of activity? Well, there's a couple of things that you can do. One is you can still ask them to answer questions in the chat. You just can't narrate them. You might be able to anticipate what some of the answers are if you've done this enough. Or the other thing that you can do, and you can do this live as well, is you can do things like draw, say you're presenting a matrix. You could draw your matrix and have them do the same. Say, hey, grab a pen, grab some paper and go ahead and, draw these 2 lines. Let's say you're presenting on something where there's 3 steps. Invite them to get their pen and their paper, and then you invite them to write down their 3 steps. So those are some of the things that you can do either live or pre-recorded to really get that sense of action going. Now you know all about how to create an engaging webinar presentation. I suggest you also take a peek at my blog, specifically the one called What Do You Do About Latecomers? We're going to put the link in the show notes, and bye for now.